It was around 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning when I turned onto our street after returning from California. As usual, I was exhausted. When I saw Sheila's car parked in front of our house, I was surprised. Sheila, although my wife Lori's closest friend, wasn't someone I thought highly of. While Sheila was undeniably attractive, her reputation gave me pause. She was a divorced woman, her marriage having ended after she was caught cheating on her husband. She often frequented bars and clubs, mingling with new people. I couldn't help but worry about Lori spending too much time with her. Entering the house, I found the kitchen empty and headed upstairs. To my astonishment, Lori was lying in bed, looking pale and worn out, while Sheila sat beside her. "Hi, baby," Lori greeted me weakly. "How was your trip?" She looked unwell, and I rushed to her side. "Are you okay, sweetie?" I asked, leaning down to kiss her. "Don't get too close," she said, raising her hand to stop me. "I think I've caught some horrible flu or something. That's why Sheila's here." Sheila flashed me a smile, subtly arching her back in a way that accentuated her figure. I wasn't sure if it was intentional or just her natural demeanor. "Hello, Todd," Sheila said. "Lori got really sick last night, so I brought her home after we spent part of the evening at Monroe. Later, she seemed feverish and had a couple of vomiting episodes, so I stayed with her until you got back." "Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate it. Can I get you coffee or breakfast?" "No, thanks. I already had coffee. Lori just spoke to the doctor, and he can see her in about half an hour. I'll take her there." I began to insist that I'd drive Lori myself, but she cut me off. "You've been up for over 24 hours, baby. You need sleep," Lori said. Reluctantly, I agreed and decided to sleep in the guest room for a few days to avoid catching whatever Lori had. 10 minutes later, I watched Sheila help Lori to the car. To my surprise, Sheila turned onto Markham Avenue, heading away from Lori's doctor's office. I was too drained to dwell on it and fell asleep almost instantly once in bed. For the next week, I played the role of a devoted husband, albeit from a safe distance. Lori told me Dr. Simon suspected it was just the flu but advised we avoid close contact for 5 days. I informed her workplace that she'd be out and took on household chores, cooking, cleaning, and even doing laundry. Each evening, I sat in a chair in our bedroom, keeping her company while watching TV, though I kept a cautious distance of at least 10 feet. By the weekend, my patience was wearing thin. Normally, Lori and I were intimate at least twice a week, but my trip to California meant I'd gone 12 days without any intimacy. By Friday, Lori seemed better, she was up, dressed, and doing light chores. That evening, I came home with roses, only to be greeted by a loving hug and a kiss. However, my hopes for a romantic evening were dashed when Lori lowered her gaze. "I'm so sorry, darling," she said. "My period started this afternoon. Can you be patient for a few days?" Disappointed, I considered asking for an alternative kind of closeness but decided to show restraint. Instead, we spent the weekend enjoying long walks, movies, and snuggling in bed, nothing more. By Tuesday, I was optimistic things might improve. I left work early to surprise Lori with a nice dinner but was greeted with 2 unexpected messages. The first was from Lori, saying, "Hey babe, sorry for the short notice, but we have to do inventory tonight. A shipment of dresses came in mislabeled. I'll be home late, probably close to midnight. Could you check if I left my phone on the dresser? It's not in my purse. Love you." Her phone was right there on the kitchen table. The second message was from Dr. Mahoney's office, reminding Lori of her appointment the next morning to have stitches removed. Stitches? I thought. This was news to me. I contemplated calling her but figured she was busy at work. I decided to ask her about it when she got home. After eating leftovers and watching some baseball, I turned in for the night. A few hours later, I woke up to the sensation of warm lips on me. Groggily, I reached for the light and was shocked to find Sheila, not Lori, in my bed. "Sheila! What the hell are you doing?" I yelled, pushing her away. Sheila, unfazed, climbed on top of me. "I've always wanted you, Todd," she murmured. "Lori's working late. She'll never know. Just this once, please." "Are you insane?" I shouted. "I'm not going to cheat on my wife." Sheila begged and tried to convince me, but I shoved her off, grabbed her clothes, and threw them at her. "Get dressed and get out of my house." Reluctantly, Sheila left, and I locked the door behind her. Exhausted, I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me. Moments later, Lori burst into the room, furious. "You son of a witch! How could you?" Her anger quickly turned to confusion as I sat up and stared at her. "Lori, what's going on?" She hesitated, her face red with embarrassment. I thought." "Thought what?" I pressed. After a long silence, she finally said, "Some girls at work were saying crazy things, and I got paranoid." "I'm sorry, Todd." Her words stung, but I kept my voice calm. "Lori, I've never betrayed you, and I never will. I hope you know that." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I do. I'm sorry I doubted you. What did you imagine I would do? Run straight to the nearest bar and pick up someone? Are you out of your mind?" She kept shaking her head, apologizing repeatedly, but I wasn't buying a word of it. Finally, I said, okay, something is clearly going on here that you don't want to tell me. I'll find somewhere else to stay until you're ready to come clean." As she cried and protested, I got dressed, pulled my suitcase out of the closet, and began packing. I didn't have any concrete plans other than finding a motel for a couple of days, but I'd had enough surprises lately and didn't want to play the clueless husband any longer. Heading for the front door, I heard Lori sobbing. "Wait, please, Todd." "Okay, I'll tell you," she pleaded. I turned around and said, "That's it, Lori. The whole truth, or I'm gone." She nodded tearfully. We went into the kitchen and sat down at the table. I asked, "So, what? You thought I'd end up in bed with some random woman tonight?" She started crying again and said, "Because I asked Sheila to seduce you." "Why on earth would you do something so ridiculous, Lori?" I asked. She couldn't meet my eyes. "I can't tell you, Todd. I did something terrible, and if I tell you, you'll leave me. Please don't divorce me," she sobbed. "Does this have something to do with the stitches Dr. Mahoney is planning to remove tomorrow?" I asked dryly. Lori stared at me in utter shock before bursting into convulsive tears. It took over 10 minutes before she could calm down enough to speak again. "It was Sheila," Lori admitted finally. "She's been convincing me for months to relax, have some fun, and go out with her when you were away on business trips. On Saturday, we went to Monroe, had some drinks, danced, and met a few of her close friends. 4 of us ended up back at Sheila's apartment around midnight, completely drunk. There were her friends, Andy and Martin, and 2 other girls. Sheila whispered to me that Martin had the biggest instrument she'd ever seen. He took me into an extra bedroom and, well, he proved it to me quite thoroughly." She whispered the last part and stopped. I was already furious and in no mood to sugarcoat anything. "What are you saying? Are you stupid?" I snapped. She shrank back. "He made me, you know, and then he wanted me to, well, take him. But he was too big, and he ripped me open. Sheila came in and saw what happened. She helped me clean up a little and took me home. She stayed with me all night, and the next morning, she took me to Dr. Mahoney. He stitched me up, gave me antibiotics, and tested me for STDs. Thank God, all the tests came back negative." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the foolish woman I'd married. Watching her squirm, I asked coldly, is that it? She nodded. It was awful, Todd. The worst experience of my life. I'm so sorry. It was just supposed to be a little dancing and flirting. I don't know how it escalated. I slammed my fist on the table, making her flinch. What happened was that you decided to try another man. And I suppose that's why you set Sheila up, to seduce me, so when you caught me, you'd have a convenient, get-out-of-jail-free card. Without looking at me, she nodded. I sat there, silently seething, watching her cry. I'd never been this angry at her, and Sheila, her so-called friend. I'm out of here, I said, standing up. I'll find somewhere to stay for a few days. No, baby, please, she cried, chasing me to the door. I'll never do it again. I swear I've learned my lesson. I'm sure you have, Lori, I replied. But whether you'll ever get the chance to prove it, that's up to me. Without waiting for her response, I slammed the door behind me. Sitting in a Best Western hotel room, unable to sleep, I couldn't help but curse my situation. 8 years of faithful marriage, and she let her best friend talk her into sleeping with a stranger. The next morning, my first stop should have been my lawyer's office to start divorce proceedings. But for some reason, the thought of it made me feel awful. After a restless 3 hours of sleep, I found myself heading to Sheila's apartment instead. I knocked until she opened the door. Her glazed eyes widened in shock before she hissed at me. Ignoring her protests, I pushed my way into her living room, closed the door, and said, "All right, Sheila. We need to talk."